For me, taking responsibility for getting myself out of my oppression is being honest with myself about the fact that the thing we call the American experiment that we find ourselves in, unfortunately, is not redeemable.
I'm not gonna lie. I have had many moments where I just say, let's split the nation up, draw the borders, go on and stay, go in the
Me
board and
too.
like operate how you want to operate.
Partition left.
We
Keep
will,
that close.
we will send helicopters to go get the people who don't want to live like that.
I don't know a thing about evangelical Christianity, um, but I know a thing about whiteness, not just my own experience. And what it felt like to me as a pattern was white fear of losing dominance.
All right. So I think, Eva, it might be good for you to start this week because the question for today, how did we slide back this far, had its roots in your concerns about apathy and apoliticalness. So I think it might be helpful to start with what's on your heart because I know that that's you've written about that a lot in the last couple weeks I've seen. And so I know that that's
Mhm.
really in your spirit right now of asking that question of like how did we get to the point where people seem to not give a shit? And correct me if I'm wrong if I'm paraphrasing, but
Yes. Um, yeah. I'm noticing in the wake of the Charlie Kirk killing, just a number of people who are who felt activated, who expressed in a way that to me communicated that they were being activated, right? Like awaken in a way, right? To say something and I mean, and these are people with whom I don't really interact. I don't regard as friends. They are the collection of people that you are associated with on Facebook, right? Like these are people I went to school with, these are former neighbors, right? Like they're not friends, they're not people I reach out to because I have a need. They're not people I reach out to because I care about their opinion or that I socialize with. These are just people that, like in Facebook now is just this collection of people that you happen to know or associate with or have some association, but I'm totally detached from these people. And they largely are silent on things political. So, it could be like if they blocked me, I wouldn't see what it is that they post, right? And I haven't blocked them because I haven't even thought about them. But hearing the boohooing on Charlie Kirk had me wonder about how they're activated now when in all things politics and things in the world, they seem largely apolitical, right? Or largely disconnected, or you can glean only so much from people not posting about things, right? And so silent in that way. So yeah, so that then had me thinking, and then there's this category of people who say, and this is among not Latinos, right? So I don't know if there's like a Spanish translation, if it's a translation, it's idiom, right? Like Spanish language idiom, but people who say I'm not political, right? And so when they say I'm not political, right? To me, I've always inferred from that statement that they are not interested in things in the world of politics, right? Like, and I inferred that they meant don't enjoy talking about things that fall in the political realm or are not informed or keep up with the things that fall into this category of politics. And when I think politics, I always thought election politics. And so that's one thing that has come up for me, right? To see them pop up and say something political, right? Because Charlie Kirk was absolutely a political figure. And to see these people who say that they're apolitical say something just for me was just like a deep wonder. The other thing that came up for me is that, okay, so there was like in my professional history, in civil rights in particular, I know a little bit about alt-right extremists. And so I've been interested in that in the sense that they are a threat to national security or safety in the United States, right? Growing, emerging, like the rage of white men, and particularly incels and groypers. Um, and so white men are absolutely a threat to my personal safety as a female bodied person, but also in the uptick in the xenophobia as a Latina, right? I also feel under threat in that way as a family member to trans people. I also feel that there's threat. And so I think about them a lot, right? But one of the things that I did not realize, that I did not assess, is their nihilism as it relates to politics, right? And in certain ways, they, as nihilists, groypers seek to hasten the destruction of the earth. We see it as, in terms of
She'll be back, but like to the point of like the apathy of people who seem like to
Yeah,
not care at all about politics, and
but
then all of a
culture
sudden
issues.
Charlie Kirk, like a part of me as she was speaking what I could hear, I was like, okay. And again, like that humanitarian in me of wanting to give people the benefit of the doubt of like,
Yeah.
is it the political violence part that's like making them like jump into the arena of wanting to say something? Like, is that where their heart is? Are they more so in the political violence piece of it and not wanting to see that happen to anybody? And that's where the sudden like, "Oh, I gotta speak up about this" comes from. And then, like, my deep bones, like the deep bones know, like, "No, this has nothing to do with it. This is what they believe and who they are." And the reason they've been apolitical or didn't really follow politics or whatever is not because that they didn't actually care, not because that they weren't actually invested in politics, it's just that they knew that if they were honest about their politics like Charlie Kirk was, it would get them
Uh,
canceled by different people or, they'd have to defend their position online and, like, all that kinda stuff. So, like,
yeah.
it's like that I had that go-to moment of, like, well, maybe it's the political violence part, and then I immediately, like, my brain is like, "Stop it." Like, stop trying to excuse it, stop trying to find, the rationales, just stop. Like, you know that the reason why these folks all of a sudden care is because they support what he stood for, and the current landscape gives them the permission to be honest about the fact that they support what he stood for, which I think goes to the question of how did we slide.
I
The
think
question for today is how did we slide this far back? And it makes me think to myself, did we slide back or did we ever really progress forward?
did we
Were we
slide
as
back
right like
really,
right,
or did
like
we ever just on the surface?
were we always did we always think that like, everything that happened with George Floyd in 2020, I think a lot of us were like, maybe this is a moment where we can, get through and maybe this will be, everyone was so hopeful about it. Everyone was so like, we can, and then the NFL started putting stuff in the end zone. You know what I mean? But several teams last week or the week before, I can't remember, several teams held a moment of silence for Charlie Kirk before their game started. So it's like, how are you going to tell me that you want to combat racism and that it takes all of us, right? Like these are the sayings that are in the end zone, but like you have a moment of silence for a man who would have said you were participating in political correctness for putting those messages in the end. Like, he would have criticized you for that. There probably is tape of him somewhere criticizing the NFL for doing that, and there probably is tape of him somewhere saying that Colin Kaepernick got what he deserved for taking a knee for racial justice. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure it exists somewhere. And even if it doesn't, given everything that he stood for, from what I can see, I don't have any reason to believe that his viewpoint on that would have been any different.
I agree.
And so for me, that's when I had my come to Jesus moment of like how like that question of how did we slide back? this far, I had my come to Jesus moment of like, we were deluding ourselves into thinking we were actually making progress because that's what we needed to feel better about our situation. Like, we needed to believe that our fellow male human beings could be better people. And I think what this has shown us is that we were wrong. We were wrong. Like, there's some people who you can reach, and we've all done that, right? There are some people who you can reach. There are some people who you can make a substantive difference with. I'm not saying you can't do that with anyone, but large scale, I no longer think that that's possible. I just don't. Because I think people are way too deeply ingrained in their socialization cycle to want to make that change. I was just saying, while you were kind of getting reconfigured, you know, that question of, like, why people who seemed apolitical wanted to jump in on Charlie Kirk, I had mentioned to Jane, like, a part of me, the humanitarian part of me wanted to believe, like, this has to do with the violence part, right? The political violence part. And then, like, my other part of me, like, in the deeper bones part of me knows, like, that has nothing it's not really about the political violence, it's that they actually believed in what he stood for. And we're in a landscape where they can now be honest about that and not feel it's as much of a danger to be honest about what they really believe in and what they really value.
Yeah, I noticed
Do you wanna
that.
say
I was going to say, I just noticed that there's religious orientation that they don't understand as political, right? There's an orientation, and it was laid out very clear to me by someone who I went to high school with, who I had no relationship with. Um, but I know she posts a lot of like Jesus-y stuff. She her and she's in the evangelical space, like, but she's Caribbean. Um, and so I don't know what kind of Caribbean, but like St. Thomas, one of those kind of, like, you know what I mean? And black, right? And her Catholic, or I was raised Catholic. And so our version of Jesus is the love Jesus, right? Love your neighbor as yourself or whatever. And her version of the religion is Jesus loves and God hates. And so they love who they
Mm.
love, but they also hate what they hate. So there's that fire and brimstone piece, retribution piece, interpretation of whatever that biblical foundation is for them, or their biblical anchor is one where Charlie Kirk's willingness and ability to hate out loud in the way that in their God hates was refreshing, right? And that's the version of like policy and whatever that anchors them, right? That there is the love Jesus and there's God who hates, right? And that's where, the floods come, and that's where, whatever. Like, so when he like degrades queer people, his root is the Bible, they
So
believe.
that's him that's so for them, that's he's channeling the wrath of God for the wicked.
Yes, yes. So that was like and I've been like mind blown for like a minute, right? Because like their politics piece, and then so like this completely complicates my understanding of identity politics. So when we try to like say about like racial solidarity and you know what I mean, there's only one meaningful identity for them, and that's saved or not saved. Saved is you receive the word of God, you believe the word of God, and the word of God is that version, that initial love and hate version of it, right? And you were saved and you believe that, and da 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 da, right? And so any kind of appeal to a racial identity, gender identity, da da da, none of that matters. So even in the space where, like, in my like Pollyannish core of health and healing and wellness, like, I cannot appeal to their sense of apathy for these identities, right? And then politics and government is below God.
Those are divine.
Right. And so you got this spokesperson, and then Trump, like the interpretation, right, is that God will send an imperfect ambassador. So he'll come with his 5 kids and 3 baby moms, right? Accusations of pedophilia, whatever, whatever. Like this is all just fueling this belief in their biblical interpretations, right? Like him, right, showing up in person. So every time we point to like how he is undermining the love version of God, they're like, you getting it wrong to begin with. He loves who he love. It's love and hate, right? You know what I'm saying? So we love that he hates out loud. We love that he is pursuing, you know, like and retribution, like his retribution stuff, and like they love all that. And so like the dissonance was Charlie Kirk was just, from my sense, it's just like they were thinking he was like they were trying to accept the fact that this spokesperson on behalf of God was martyred in this way, right? Like that, right? And that we did not care that this man of God was killed, right? And so it wasn't like we were saying this bigot was killed, and they saw him truly as an ambassador, of the word of God. And that opened up just a lot. And so like I was thinking about their political apathy in a way that, there's one thing for to be politically apathetic about, but there's another thing to be whatever the converse of that, like almost like fervency, like, I mean, like, I don't know what the word is, right? Like that energetic, hyper fixated, like bubbling with connection and like fervor is the only word that I can come up with for something they wouldn't call politics, right? It's,
Right, because it's not
it's
political. This isn't political to
Values.
them. This is about right. This is about fundamentally right and wrong.
right, right. So like there's appeal to that, right? So like it's about, yeah. So it's about that, right? And they're keen on this guy who has like a no religious or like academic discipline around his religion. He was a community college dropout, degrading Black women and for their education or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and so there, but it just all attaches to this evangelical interpretation that I really didn't understand, right? And so like their apathy is really political, like we would call it political for like them being really extremist believers of a political orientation they would never call politics.
Right, because to them, politics is what's the word I'm looking for? It is futile compared to what the actual mission is. It almost sounds like to even put it in the class of politics would be blasphemous.
Yeah. Yeah, like all of
Becau
this has happened, the world's going to end. And then, the Groypers are like the world is going to end. They want to hasten its ending, right? They don't, right? So like Trump's finger on the nuclear codes, yeah, cool. You know what I mean? Let's have fun, let's cause chaos or whatever. So it's neither left nor right. It is off the spectrum. It is on another parallel, not parallel. It's almost, to me, it's off in its own direction, right? And so like to be apathetic is not about like tapping in and caring about what's happening. It is about like some distinct trajectory, off the access point.
Well, I
well,
have to
when I
weigh in, if I may.
yeah, go ahead, yeah.
In the frame of the same, how did we slide this far? And Eva, when you were talking about this initially with not political people, not political in quotes, what I've felt or I've seen is something that is familiar to me. White people freaking out, having a panic attack, like an OMG moment. And I think some of it, I can't weigh in. I don't know a thing about evangelical Christianity, but I know a thing about whiteness, not just my own experience. What it felt like to me as a pattern was white fear of losing dominance. Some of the people who were coming out to support Charlie Kirk, and I wondered, did they even know him? Really? Were they listening to other than the obvious Christianity link? And what I think, this is such a dot to connect for me. There's a story I sometimes tell about a dentist I had and a white dentist. I won't say the name. And he once said to me as a patient, like just in conversation about Black people, direct quote, we've done a lot for these people. And it hit me. And this happens to me a lot as a white person when the white person is safe and they say the thing that they would not say. I don't think they're really hiding their point of view from anyone, but I do think the words I've sometimes heard were sometimes hidden. And suffice to say, that was not my dentist for long. But the underlying fear that I believe the MAGA movement is tapping into related to ideas of great replacement or whiteness being erased and white people not being, we would say privileged. Are they losing privilege, losing advantage? What's their interest? So I'm not speaking specifically about Charlie Kirk and whiteness, but all of this led me to just remembering that feeling wasn't from that statement wasn't from a KKK member, that wasn't from just a dentist, and in a city. And yeah, there were Black people working there were Black patients. It was so poignant to me because I thought, well, how does he treat his Black patients if that's how he feels? And it just got me. So the reason I brought it up was on the question of the how we slide this far back and were we ever, is I remembered this would have been late 90s, position it. So quite a while ago. A lot of the diversity work that I was getting involved in was using as an educational tool. I don't have the attribution, but it was a scale and it was well facilitated, not by me, like consultants. And it had a tolerance on one end and like repulsion on the other end. And they used photos of people. And it got you thinking about a lot of, snap judgments we make. So it worked in the sense of that. But at some point, someone said, like, really, is tolerance our goal? Are we really that what we're shooting for? We want who? White people to tolerate who? Black people? We want straight people to tolerate fellow employees. And yeah, the conversation was helpful in the end, but it reminded me that the people, white people in particular, and I guess the Christianity pull is one I'm going to look into more, but what I felt like I was seeing was just racial solidarity. Like, oh no, you're not going to do this to our golden white boy, man. And that's always, under the surface, the feeling of how we break with our socialization patterns, as you said, Taye. So I wondered if it was just strictly like, these are nice white people. And they look very lovely family, a young white family. And how could anyone do this? I don't know if it's deeper than that on some level. Is it just the racial fault line of America exposed yet again of how we have different whole lives? I'll pause there. Too many more thoughts going, but what do you think?
You know, I'm sitting here thinking about the analogy I like to give in my trainings that I've done about the difference between fault and responsibility. So, like, I'll say, like, someone rear ends you in a car accident, right? It is 100% that person's fault, but you still have the responsibility of filling out the police report, getting your car in the shop, going and pick up like all the stuff that goes along with that. You still have the responsibility of that. And I say all of the time, like I usually talk about this with microaggressions in particular, of like systemic oppression is not your fault. A microaggression, you may not have intended to do it, whatever, but we still have the responsibility to deal with that. And that's one piece of what I'm thinking about. And then the other piece of what I'm thinking about is the concept of radical responsibility and taking radical responsibility for any situation you may find yourself in, whether it's your fault or not. So, larger scale, when we ask the question, how did we slide back this far? I think to myself, our oppression is not our fault, but do we have a responsibility to be more clear eyed about what we're dealing with and move accordingly? Like we tried to take responsibility for that through DEI, right? Like that, like you might say DEI was one of our attempts at trying to take responsibility for trying to show other people this does not have to be this way. That diversity and inclusion and belonging is a different way to be, it's a better way to be because it encompasses the humanity of all of us. It was our polite attempt, right? Like that was us trying to be polite. That was our polite attempt at trying to say like, "Hey, we understand that you weren't here when slavery was around, and we know that you weren't a colonizer because you weren't here." Like all that stuff. Can we like we can accept that and talk and work through that? And we the way we want to work through that is through the DEI conversation. But now I think to myself, did we take responsibility for being more truthful with ourselves as the oppressed about what we were actually dealing with? I don't know I can say that we did. 'Cause like right now I think to myself, the next wave of DEI is probably gonna try to do this again, right? Like we're probably gonna like, how do we pull people in? How do we get people to see? How do we change hearts and minds? Like I feel like we're gonna do that again when decade after decade after decade after decade after incident after incident after incident has shown us that that's not going to work. It's just not going to work. We've been doing this for a long time. Yet here we are again. Here we are again. And my question is at some point do we as the oppressed have to say we have tried to do this in a way to try to bring people in and to not play the blame game and not try to make people feel like shit, and they just don't give a fuck. Like, they are for whatever reason, which we may never know or may never understand, they just are where they are. So does the next iteration of our work say, "Okay, we need to take responsibility in accepting that." We're not responsible for their debauchery. I'm not saying that by any means. But I do think we have to take responsibility for saying for being honest with ourselves and saying this is the reality of the situation that we're in.
Clear diagnosis.
Right,
Yes.
a clear diagnosis of what we're in. So if we know that and we know that we cannot debate our way, convince our way, plead our way, negotiate our way into being in shared humanity with our oppressor because they have no interest in that. What is our responsibility then to make adjustments to do what we have to do to demand our freedom?
Saying that, how did that feel? Saying that.
Scary, and I'll tell you why. Because knowing how the average person is socialized, they're going to automatically assume I'm calling for violence. I can hear someone thinking and interpreting that as, well, the only answer to that is physical violence, and that's not what I mean.
Mm.
Thanks, Tay.
I'm not gonna lie. I have had many moments where I just say, let's split the nation up, draw the borders, go on and stay, go in the
Me
void
too.
and like operate how you want to operate.
Partition them.
We will,
Ridiculous.
we will send helicopters to go get the people who don't want to live like that, right? Like we won't even hold you. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like keep the land, right? Texas go on, keep the land, right? Mexico on your other side. You know what I'm saying? United States against oppression on the other. And you can keep your oppression, you can keep your little oil fields until they dry and operate as you will in a climate with climate differences, right? In your hot land. Go on and do that until they dry up. And we take people out. We'll take the Dakotas. It's a lot of space over there. To me, it's just like I have thought about that a lot. Ain't nobody over there. Ain't nobody in the
Bingo.
Dakotas. There ain't nobody in Montana. You know what I mean? We can take people over there, right? Like draw the maps around like Arkansas, and all of those states with the lowest education. Keep your current
I
infrastructure.
have the whole partition range
Yes,
worked out.
right. New York, California, New Jersey, Connecticut will not give you another dime, but we wish you well, and we will pay and give everybody a tiny home until we can figure out how to get you a regular home. And
Reload plan.
yeah,
Relocation package.
reload pack. Right, and just keep it. That would be amazing. And so, like,
Yeah, I
no
I think
fighting.
I think there's a
Thanks,
growing
thanks.
number of us who are starting to seriously ask that question. Like, and it's the question I've been asking and the statement I've been making for a while that For me, taking responsibility for getting myself out of my oppression is being honest with myself about the fact that the thing we call the American experiment that we find ourselves in, unfortunately, is not redeemable. It's just not. It's not. This isn't redeemable. But for a lot of people, that just it feels too heavy. Because if you s
Scary.
it's scary, right? It's like, if you say that like, I think about, like, the history of our country, even from its inception, right? Like, they fought an entire war to get from under British rule, and the compromise in order to keep the quote unquote "union" together, the compromise was the Southern states get to keep enslavement because 'cause they're not gonna join in the Union if they don't get to keep that. That was the bargain. Other people's humanity was the bargain in order to preserve the Union. Abraham
Hmm.
Lincoln had to do it again at the Civil War. They tried to do Reconstruction, and it didn't stick because the Southern states weren't having it. They tried, but the Southern states weren't having it, and it's like, "Nope, if you're gonna free these people, then we get to terrorize their ass. Otherwise, we out this bitch again."
And
And
weren't
what was
they
the
paid?
compromise? Right, and they got paid, right?
They
That was
got paid
all
for the
that
slaves they lost.
and got paid for all that, for their losses, right? All of this was done in order to preserve the Union. So I think to myself, if preserving the Union means continuing to dehumanize people. I don't know about anybody else, but preserving this union is not more important to me than people's human rights. It's just not. You know what I mean? Like if we got to break this up and figure out how to govern ourselves in a different way, I would much rather do that hard work as a citizen. I will be one of the first folks in line to do that hard work as a citizen to figure out how we're going to govern ourselves and what type of system we're going to have and how we're I will do that hard work to create a separate union that does not compromise people's human rights. And I think right now that is the grinder that people are really struggling with because at the end of the day, again, that's ultimately what this is about. If this were a marriage, a business partner, anything else where it was this contentious or this difficult, all parties involved would have said, you know what, y'all, we don't gonna have to hang this up. You're gonna have to go your way. This is not gonna work. The only reason we're still trying to make this work is because we're still trying to preserve the union. And at what cost?
Right. And there
At
is
what
no
cost?
union. There is no union.
Was there
Right.
ever
Fundamentally, there's people who believe that we do not have a democracy. We have a constitutional republic, whatever that means, right? Right. And so it's just like, and there's black and brown people in that camp, right? Who are whole for, so yeah. Like if you don't realize their whole thing is rooted in dominance, and when they get their way, you will be dominated. You can go and stay. We're gonna send choppers and or planes, and we're gonna get people out, right? And then you stay, and then you keep the chains they got for you, right? Because I think the other thing is that I think I'm at a stage where it's like everybody is like so rooted in this constitution that is so deeply flawed that at some point everybody's been in this position where you're just like there is so you piqued my energy around this, Ty, when you talked about the American project, which is the term that I've used, right? But we've all been in projects where we know you get mired into this editing hole where you're like edit this, edit this, edit this, and then it like cues onto this whole other thing, and you're just like at some point in the project you scrap the project and you start fresh because that's easier than editing, right? Like you could
some
be
cost?
you could cut and paste stuff and throw it on the clipboard, points that, like but our copy and edits are more like we knew where the gap on this one was. We're not using this. We're writing something completely different because my spirit says to me that like when all of this stuff is happening, right? I'm like, when we look at how the current administration is operationalizing the 13th Amendment clause about incarceration, it is easy to see how they're operationalizing, jailing people for civil infractions to immigration laws to mobilize the 13th Amendment clause to incarcerate them and the money they'll make, right? Right? Because they do have to find people to accept these labor jobs for no pay, right? Because that's fundamentally what they want, right? People with these civil infractions to be jailed so that they will do the work of being a free employee. So, as cheaply as they got undocumented people to do this work or migrant people to do this work, they want it even cheaper. That's the condition under which they want it from. Right? So, like, that whole 13th Amendment, make no amendments. Write it the right way the first time, the next time. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
Instead
that
of editing it.
and Jane, and I just wanna
Yeah,
say really quick,
please, yeah.
this way when folks say to me right, and I would agree with you, Eva, with one very important caveat. It doesn't matter what we write down.
Hmm.
At bottom, it doesn't. It does in some ways, but at bottom, it doesn't. If the character of the people who are responsible for upholding the document are still vested in oppressive tactics. They will always find a way to twist the language, to change the language, to change the law, to what they will find ways to bend what's written to their will in order to continue oppressing. This is why I read the other day Donald Trump has asked the Supreme Court to expedite an interpretation of his order to strip birthright citizenship. I fully expect our Supreme Court to co-sign him,
Uh-huh.
which means they've eliminated us functionally. They've eliminated that amendment. They have functionally eliminated it in practice and did
Mm.
not have to have a constitutional convention and everything that goes along with a constitutional convention to do so. So, like, we can talk about the documents and we can talk about the law, and we can do all of that, but if we don't have the people who care enough about putting humanity first, the documents don't mean anything because the oppressor only cares about power, and the oppressor is going to do whatever it takes, even if it means functionally erasing an amendment without going through the process to get what they want.
Yeah, I agree. What's on my mind related to all of this is somehow affirmative action is in my brain. And it is there because what were the EEO laws and affirmative action implementation arms of civil rights? Oversimplifying. Does that work for you too? The When I tried to reflect back on a long 30 years of working, 15 years and 15 at one place, I realized that what seemed effective and almost like there was no other way to do it, when the backlash about affirmative action that must have been building, not before I was born, but before I was in the workplace anyway. Because I arrived in this diversity, it's just the one word, diversity work. And I'm sure you both have or use or have seen these continuums that describe civil rights movement, affirmative action. And then, in my experience, the framing we were using, and this is now, let's say, mid-90s corporate, was diversity isn't about that. Diversity is different. And it was about everyone and inclusion. And I think, it's not the first time I've thought this, but why'd we do that? Why did a diversity, whatever it was at the time, the practice of diversity in, I'll stick to my experience, organizations. Why'd we spend so much time showing the powers that be, usually more white men, especially in the 90s, that no. My version of it is, this isn't affirmative action. We agree with you. We're going to comply with the government. No, we're going to keep ourselves legal, but we're not about that. We're about inclusion and these, dare we say, softer things. And I think that was a big mistake. So that's a long way of saying, I think one of the reasons and what I would do differently, and I did do differently, I won't go into it, relative to race in America, particularly, was allowing race to get subsumed into just differences. Because in America, and I have to keep using it, the fault line around race and segregation. And the whole history that you two have been describing, that never went away. And the efforts that companies used to address issues of inequity, they were not going to be effective if we were pretending that those issues were separate and handled and we were all good now. We're nice white people. And I think the other thing I felt the need to get out is on the how'd we slide this far back or slide or did we ever get anywhere? I think unconscious bias was a massive overstatement of what was going on. And it took the eye off the systemic things that were still just playing out. And I'll stop there on this issue. But those two things, to me, it went from affirmative action, like taking actions, to create equity because it wasn't there and the law said it should be, to this whole idea of it's unconscious. Unconscious bias is the problem. And so you're not a bad person. You just didn't know. And we could do 17 conversations about that, but I would love to pick that apart with you guys sometime. That unconscious bias was there's a lot of good things about it, obviously, but it got a little co-opted.
Can I give you a little tidbit? I don't
Mhm.
even like the term implicit bias anymore.
I know.
I don't
I
like it.
didn't like
And the reason why is partly what you said, Jane, but it's also just fundamentally not true. Like, the bias is not implicit, like, so when you gave the example of the dentist who said to you, "We've done so much for these Black folks." He explicitly said it to you. Wasn't anything implicit about it. He
no.
explicitly said that to you. He
I think it's yeah.
is aware in his mind of how he feels about Black people. There's
Yes.
nothing implicit about that. So when I think about how that term came to be, and I was guilty of it too, of running around talking about implicit bias, like, in my head, I go, this was us trying to mitigate for white fragility before it even showed up,
Mhm.
because we knew that if we said, "No, you're socialized as racist and you show up as racist," it would have felt too like, "Ooh, wait a minute. You calling me Yes, because you're socialized to be that way. That's the waters you're swimming in. Why would I expect you to show up as anything else than what you've been trained to be ever since you were birthed into this country? That's silly." But we knew that we couldn't just say that out loud because we felt like we needed our allies, right? And we couldn't bring them in if they felt like we were attacking them. So we constructed all these different terms in order to preemptively cut the blowback we knew we were gonna get, because we just didn't wanna say to them what we knew we needed to say. And you know how Charlie Kirk, his whole thing was "prove me wrong"? I think that can actually be used in reverse. Prove me wrong that you are not socialized to show up racist, sexist, homophobic, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong that you are not socialized to do those things that you are socialized to do and make a better decision that is centered in love and humanity of somebody else other than protecting your own interest and scarcity mindset. Prove me wrong that you are a better person than I expect you to be because I know what you've been socialized in. We just didn't wanna say that.
Wow. I agree.
I don't know if I agree, but I will say that
All right.
in the way that I
Discussion.
interact with the term, it's not, I think that there are contexts under which that it's used in the ones that I've done anyway, is to understand a very specific set of circumstances, which is mostly about workplace or school climate, as opposed to a structural understanding of policy and da 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 da. Right. So it's like intended to like inform interpersonal action or inaction, as opposed to understanding, like how we handle vendors or whatever, even though like it can be used to open up conversations about some of the more subtle ways that it is informed, mostly around inaction or more, you know what I mean? So like, I think that in the way that I've seen it, it's not a catch-all, or at least it's not positioned as a catch-all framework. But I do agree that for some people, it's a convenient and, as you say, insufficient entry point to understanding the people who want something, want to, like, you know, put the hard truth into some sort of like sweet substance for somebody else, right? And like I think, and doing that, like has, like creates, like just reinforces a dynamic of like stupidity and fear and fragility, as you say, right? But I think that part of the fragility that it does is on the part of the people who need to be advocates and strong advocates and competent advocates. But it's been used for convenience and ease of people who are ill equipped to do this work or have this, like to champion the real thing. So like I'll agree, I agree to that point. I don't think it's the source of, all the problems or most of the problems or many problems even, right? I'll just say that, like what happens is that people lack fundamental skills. And that's me and my more connected humans, hat is just like, you're ill equipped to wade into the level of conflict and tumult and turmoil that this necessarily creates when you are talking with somebody who's ill equipped to receive the feedback, right? And like who thinks that like you bringing up conflict is the conflict, right? Itself, rather than your lack of capacity is naming this a conflict, like professional capacity, personal capacity, right? And I'll argue everybody who's incapable of giving good feedback or receiving good feedback are probably in relationships and they're the kind of parents that suck, right? Because that level of incapacity will thread every part of your life. We just happen to be, like practitioners who have offices that are intended to address this stuff, but the lack of capacity threads their whole life.
Mm.
And that's why the world sucks too. No, I'm kidding. Like, I'm not kidding, but like, no, that's why they make terrible friends, right? Like,
All right. I know I've got to get going here soon because I'm picking up baby early. I think for our
baby
next
feeling okay?
question, yeah, he's feeling better. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I think for our next question, I think we could think about who do we want to build community with, right? Like if we know that
Yeah.
we can't bring everybody along, which I think this conversation has helped us, like we're not gonna save folks the way we thought we were or we hoped we could. So like who do we want to build community with? And more importantly, like how I don't want to say like what's the test to see if they're worthy, but that's kind of what it feels like. Like, what's our, like here's the 10-point checklist of, like, here's the things I need to see before I am willing to take the risk of being in community with you and trying to do this work with you, still knowing you're socialized the way you're socialized, and you still probably are gonna disappoint me, but at least but at
A
least
litmus. A
right,
litmus.
right,
Yeah.
what's my test? That is I feel like I don't know how you all feel about that as our follow-up question.
I like it, and I think it even could be a hopeful question, despite it might not be a lot of people who pass the litmus, but someday I'll bring in I would like to have a conversation about when I went to work at a company that was willing to be honest about race in America, and over years and years, a moment where 4 white women, me, head of CEO, head of HR, and employment lawyer, and it took one of them we're looking at data and seeing the reality for our African American employees in particular. And one said, I mean, is it us? Is it us? And meaning our company, what are we doing or us as white leaders? And
Mm.
that was a pivotal moment. That so to me, the answer would be part of the litmus is the white person or the person socialized into the dominant group in a system of racial hierarchy. Are they willing to even ask that question? That would be part of mine.
You know what my test would be, oddly enough? My test would be, can you pass a constitution test? Can you pass a
My
citizenship test? And here's why.
I'll fail.
Here's why. If you can pass a citizenship test, What that tells me is on some level, you care enough about the societal structure to at least know how it works. And so for me, I'm like, okay, I can take a risk on you on some level because I know you're demonstrated through this quick hit thing. Like if I don't have more time with you to if I have to make a more quick hit decision, if you can do that, then at least I know you care enough to understand what's going on around you and that your mind and your heart are invested in what's happening around you. That for me is at least a good place to start.
We talk about liberated states of America.
I was going to say this test
The
will help with just men.
liberated states of America. And then you could pass the test for citizenship in our states.
Yes.
You wanna talk soft secession? The
Yes.
whole soft secession that's going
Yes,
around.
I
Not
did.
even not even secession. I mean partition.
Just cut
Let
it off.
let's just cut it off.
Just
Cut
cut
it
it.
off.
Just cut it. Like all the blue states say, fuck it. Fuck it in the bucket. It's us, and we taking our money, and we taking our stuff, and we gonna farm our own stuff. And you red states can figure it out, and you purple states, I don't know what y'all gonna do. Take a vote and figure out where you want to be.
And in the blue states, you take a
But
test if you
mostly
want to
I want
stay.
to ideate. But mostly I want to dream out loud. But mostly I want to be like, you will go on and take your MAGAT excellence, right? Which
Right.
you're,
Be
which
excellent in your maggotness over
be,
there.
yeah. Go and do that with your
May
trad
God bless
wives.
you. May the good Lord bless you. I'm
Yeah,
holler
like
at
we don't,
you.
you,
Peace.
and we won't even make you leave. You know what I'm saying? You keep your schools as they are currently.
Right. If
Keep
you
them.
want to be cesspools of diseases, have
Keep
at
it.
it.
Have at it. We'll
But
leave.
just know, if you don't have no documentation showing that you got some vaccines, you can't come here.
You can't come here.
You
Be
can't
sick
come.
with each other. Give each other's measles, mumps, and
Mumps and
rubella.
rubella.
You
You
can
can do
have
that.
rubella
You can
and
have rubella
polio. You can have polio.
and all that shit. And COVID, you can have all that shit.
Yeah, we'll take
You
all
can
your
work for a
autistic
penny.
people. We'll take them all. You leave them
That's right.
alone.
Right. Leave
We'll
them
take
alone.
all your trans people. You leave them
Leave
alone.
them
Y'all come
alone.
here.
You have amnesty and free passage. If you want out, come on.
There ain't no coming back and forth, though. There ain't no visiting. No. And don't come
But
to
if
Can't
you want us,
Broadway.
poison.
you with us. You on
Don't
the
come over here to
team.
Broadway. Don't come here to Broadway. Right? And don't come and ask for a visa to come visit. No. Stay there. Make your own Broadway. Go on and do that. Right? Like
Make your own
don't
shit.
no. And NFL be like,
We
no.
keep
The
it. We
NFL
keeping the culture
splits.
part.
Like the NFL will be like, no, like you can't have any teams over there. Or if you can, no black people will play, right? No. So that's what I'm saying. So like, you don't like black people, but
Man,
you like the
that
culture.
sounds like
You
fun.
can't have the
What does
culture.
Puzzle.
what does the liberated states of America look like? You can't have a culture. That comes with
You
us.
know,
Yes.
I know we have to go. There's a lot of research about something called espoused theory. People say, like the Constitution. So your test is good versus the theory in action. Are people operating? And I think that's all we need to do. That's the litmus. If you can't illustrate your commitment to the behavioral side of United States of America, you're out. There is no
No,
such.
I don't want to be no United States. I want nothing.
Liberate.
They can keep the name too.
All right.
Keep the eagle.
Yeah.
Keep it all, keep it all. You can keep all the songs.
Flag too.
Keep them. Well,
Well,
Not the eagle. You can keep the eagle. You can keep the flag. You can keep all that shit. You can keep the national
you can
anthem.
have
You can keep
Mount
all that
Rushmore.
shit.
We'll cut off Mount Rushmore. You can take all of that.
continue this.
That
Let's talk
sounds
about
fun.
that.
You know you have to
I'm
go.
just saying, I'm throwing it out there so that we can come back and be like, what does your version look like? What can they keep? What do we take?
Liberated States of America.